I'm Frank Cartwright. I'm a program manager at Microsoft. I work in the casual games studio. So I'm basically responsible for all of the web-based stuff, HTML5 content and website. So you guys want to first go through and sort of do a brief introduction?
Sure. I'm Nathan Sellyn. I'm the Chief Creative Officer at FlowMotion Entertainment, soon to be rebranded as Heart Plus Games. We make casual titles for a primarily female audience up in Vancouver, Canada.
Cool. Hey, I'm David, and I already had a lavalier on, so I guess they dragged me up here again. I'm the CEO of Devil Coconut. We make a lot of casual games, and we've made quite a few instant games as well.
I'm Jeff Su, the General Manager of Mintegral, and we focus on being the bridge between the East and the West, helping Western developers go to China and APAC.
All right. And I'm John Middleton. I'm a co-founder and CEO of Nifty Games. We're a relatively new company focused on short session sports games for mobile, based in the Bay Area and Los Angeles.
All right. Thanks. We've got a good variety on the panel, which is cool. So as it says, we're going to do a discussion about instant games versus usual casual, which I think is basically just casual in this context. So the first question I have for the panel here is, what's the difference between instant games, casual games, hyper-casual games? And do developers do both, or is there a specific use case for each of those? You want to start?
Yeah, I think the difference between hyper-casual instant games is kind of about reach. I think developers should definitely do both. I think instant games can be a good way for marketing and discovery. I think a lot of the times when hyper-casual or casual developers are trying to target an audience, let's say on Facebook, it's hard for them to target specifically the younger generation or tweens, but being kind of like inserted into Snap or Facebook allows them to get access to these users to increase their brand or kind of re-engage users who have already downloaded their app.
I think from the Nifty Games perspective, we look at instant games, yeah, definitely in a promotional aspect. It's more of a reach out and how we can find different fans of sports, kind of where they reside, and it gives us the ability to go and kind of put that content in front of a lot of people that otherwise might not see our games. So I think that's a big difference for us. And then getting into casual, and then for us, I mean, I think we even veer a bit more towards kind of mid-core casual and some hyper-casual. I think there's a bit more depth going on that side, but the instant games I think are incredibly useful, not just for promotional, but for us we're big into building community and big into kind of working with our players, towards building leagues and having interaction amongst, the social side and the community side of instant is really, it's an interesting thing to us.
Right.
Yeah, it's a good question. I view it kind of as layers. So hyper-casual is stripping away all the layers and to me, it's just a core mechanic. Maybe even one finger, a very quick session, one thing you're doing, and that one thing's got to be perfect and fun. And then you start adding on more layers and more systems and more mechanics. You get to casual. And then if you want to do instant games, you can have that same hyper-casual core as the main layer, but you do need the right social piece on top, I think, to be successful. Sure.
Got it. So it's interesting. You talked about sort of as a way to acquire users, and is it a little bit scary, or would it sort of kind of sacrifice the quality of the games if a lot of people you leverage it as a UA channel as opposed to like high quality games? You don't have to start. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, from my standpoint, I don't think that the quality needs to suffer per se. I think maybe it's more of a sample or slice of what we're going after in the larger sense of the games we're trying to make and the experiences we're looking to build.
Right.
But I think that's an opportunity. Again, it's you're mining for in our case we're looking for sports fans, and we know that instant games can do a pretty good job at getting at that socially. So it's something we're interested in exploring, but we certainly don't want to sacrifice any quality or have it be kind of a lesser experience to the point that it's laughable. Right. I think we want it to be in tune with what our overall effort is.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a scary for whom. Like on the developer side of things, if you're viewing instant games as purely a UA channel and reach, and we're going to give you this preview, but we hope you eventually fall so in love that you're coming over and playing on native mobile where we can offer you a more fulsome experience, that's one thing, but that doesn't feel great for the platforms if you're just the hosting the trailers. And I think that is not the situation per se today, but there's certainly some games where it does appear that's the case, and I think moving away from that is pretty important for the platforms.
Thank you. Yeah, that was it. I guess I was thinking more scary for the platform, because the last thing you want to do is have, when you're trying to have a sort of robust platform, have basically a bunch of ads essentially there for better games off the platform. So, okay, so Facebook earlier had said that that instant games are about instant experience and social play, and that social is paramount. And had some numbers. Social equals greater than 10 times as many weekly players when there's social, which sort of obviously makes sense. But do instant games have to be social?
I think it's pretty critical that they should be social, and I think if you look at what Facebook and Snap are doing, they're kind of having dedicated game tabs within the app, which inherently provides great shareability and virality. And based off of David's talk earlier, if you're having that kind of social interaction, that leads to retention. Your friends are essentially bringing you back into the game, and then then Facebook can thus drive more ads and make more revenue off of this model.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, so I don't think they have to be, but you're going to spend a whole lot less on acquisition if they are, right? So I think that's the main benefit if you can successfully do it as a developer, is you're just going to get a lot of free users because people become your marketing team.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's they don't have to be, but you're not taking advantage of the advantages of the platforms if you're not at least building some social element in. But I think it also requires a bit of a clear definition that you certainly can't provide myself of what constitutes social. We saw that 10x number this morning from Ginger, but at the same time, we know that Candy Crush is very popular. Is Candy Crush a social title because it has some sharing elements and some leagues versus, some of the sort of battle royale runner types where you're actually engaging with other players in every instance or bots in every instance? And yeah, where is, just because there is some sharing involved, does that constitute social? And is that enough to make you where you're taking advantage of that opportunity?
Right.
Yeah, and I think for us with Nifty Games that we're building free-to-play head-to-head mobile sports. It's we're inherently community-driven, social-driven. So I think social for the instant game side of it, if we go in that direction in the future to whether it is kind of a UA activity or whether it's more for fuller game experiences, it absolutely has to be social. Because it's got to drive that same community. I think it's no different than what we're focused on in just the mobile first.
Right.
Yeah, and also just add the platforms have done a pretty good job locking it down, so you can't exploit social the way you could say in the early days of Canvas Facebook gaming. A decade ago now? Yeah, a while ago. you actually have to be genuinely social, or just it doesn't work. There's very limited ways you can be social, so it has to be genuine. And but yeah, that's the right place for it. That's what people expect, I think.
Yeah, and and again with us on the sports side, we've seen sports do really well with instant games thus far, and even in the Facebook presentation earlier, they had a lot of different examples of sport that have done well. And I think anything where you get into competitive head-to-head, content, the social aspect has to be there, because you're not going to want an instant game even that's isolating to the player. You want them to be able to experience it with either competition against another player or co-op with their friends. So you want to have a good amount of social and community-driven tools in there as well. And they're there for the it's really the strongest part, I think, of instant games. So, it wouldn't make sense not to use it.
Right. I think it's. I guess it's the thought is, if it's a game that's just naturally solo, would it make sense to be there, and would it hurt the platform to have it there? Because it's not, obviously it makes sense from the perspective of marketing and acquisition and things like that. So, what are we seeing that's similar to this sort of from the APAC side? Did we just copy the WeChat, or did Facebook just copy what WeChat's doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think WeChat, yes. WeChat basically has what is called mini programs, and you can do anything from, hail a Didi or build a game, or, use the Chinese version of Yelp, all within WeChat, which is a super app. So the natural progression is to kind of, it's owned by Tencent, and the natural progression is to essentially have games within the platform. And you'll see that, Facebook is following suit, Snap is following suit. So yes, it's following the trend of Chinese WeChat.
I don't know that I could have more than you to say on this one, Jeff.
Right.
Yeah, we defer to the expert here.
Exactly. All right. What about the investment? So if you say you have a casual game, it's not an instant game. What's the investment, and why would you or would you not do it?
I guess this is a good question for us, as we've sort of examined porting some of our better games over. And, from a pure time investment perspective, in terms of our, man months or whatever, it certainly makes sense to always be on every platform you can. At the same time, there's the examination of what are we going to need to pull out from a sort of fully featured casual title to make it appropriate for this audience, and what do we need to add in from a social perspective to ensure we're taking advantage of the opportunities on the platform. And that's a bit of a longer conversation. We've got to hit the size parameters, and we still want to make sure we're offering our customers a fully fledged game and not potentially cannibalizing native mobile customers. So those are the kind of decisions we've gone through, and ultimately we're pursuing the development path, but those were the things we had to think about.
What platform are you using?
Right now we're just, what we'll be using to develop it, or what we'll be using it's the Unity.
You're able to stick to one platform, Unity, and pop out with a little bit of tailoring.
A little bit of, a medium bit of tailoring, let's call it.
Yeah, no, it's good to see Unity and some of the browsers become more mature where that's possible, and then I think you can have one core IP or one core solid gameplay, and then pop it out in many different type of substrates, right? Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, at least up until now, a lot of that entailed truly porting it to HTML5 and essentially redoing the game and taking the assets and putting it in a new platform. So
it was funny. We had built playables in HTML5, so it was we had gained some side experience, and the playables also taught us a lot about what are we stripping out and still maintaining our core loops, and what do we want to showcase among those. So weirdly, the playables were like good training wheels for what we might need to do. But then we discovered, that Unity would get us where we needed to be eventually.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, we're big believers in cross-platform play. It's just a matter of, can we maintain the quality content we want? Can we maintain our business models? We're not, necessarily heading in an ad-driven direction. We're more, IAP. And I think, as you go to Instant, it's just another kind of cross-platform extension. I think that's important to try to figure out, okay, how are you going to monetize that? How are you going to use that effectively to build out the communities that, whether you're trying to bring them back into your core game, it's not a lot different than if we were to put a game in some ways, on Steam. It's just going in a totally different direction. It's just we want to make sure the experience is still really, satisfying, and yet when you go to Instant, you also want to make sure that the content isn't overwhelming to what an Instant gamer might expect. So, I think we'll play with it and see if we can come up with things that work well to build out communities across the board.
Got it. Cool. So, what do you think Facebook is doing well, and where do you think that there's room for opportunities as far as the platform goes? I'm asking the hard questions.
No, I'm happy to. I mean, I think where there's room for opportunity across the instant game space, be it in WeChat or Snap or on Facebook, is that there's still not, let's call it a killer app. There's no Twitch Plays Pokemon or Halo or Team Fortress, something that drives people to platform adoption because it is exclusive. And I don't mean exclusive in evil Epic taking Borderlands away from us exclusive. I mean, exclusive in that it only functions on that because of the opportunities provided by the platform. It can only exist on that platform. And I think Snap is certainly trying out some stuff with it right now. I don't think to any success, but there will be something at one point for one of those platforms that brings people along just for that title. And whether it's the platforms incentivizing the development of that title or it coming about organically, I think that's where the opportunity lies for one or all of them.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think, you look at WeChat or Snap or Line or Facebook or, I mean, the biggest asset is obviously there's, in total billions of people interacting with one another. I think of games, I think of, Words with Friends or some of kind of the older mobile social or social innate titles that were more synchronized turn-based, and I said, okay, that looks like it's probably something that would work well on Messenger, and it has. I think the question is where does it go from there, and I think there's, as platforms emerge, there's always people being creative enough to figure out a way to make something that's kind of inspiring enough that a lot of people get into it, and a lot of money is made, and success is found. And I think that's kind of it's always in gaming. It's always been the way. We're pretty good at adapting to new distribution platforms, and then I think we try to find the not just the content from from a recognizable sense, but also working with that content to fit that platform. And so I think it'll happen, and it'll happen relatively soon, because there's just so many people sitting there that have access to the games.
Yeah, I mean, I guess one problem I'll throw out there, and I don't necessarily have a solution, but one thing that I'd love to see done better is discovery. I mean, it still is really hard to, as a player, be excited about or see what the upcoming games are and new games, and if I'm interested in one genre, seeing the other genres of game. I mean, the app stores still suck at discovery, but the instant game platforms suck a whole order of magnitude worse. And I don't know, again, the solution. It's not necessarily natural to have like a whole store inside the thing, but that would be nicer, certainly. both from a player's point of view and developer's point of view.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting because I've found myself personally. I think we talked about this before. Is like conceptually, it sounds awesome, and I talk with friends. I have text groups that I talk to all the time. 20 times a day, sending whatever. But most of the playing I've done in instant games has been like a research type of thing, right? So, what do you think that Facebook or the other platforms could do to, and this is sort of tied to the other question, same sort of thing, but what could they do, say in Messenger, to make somebody like me play more? Let's design it.
Yeah, that's a it's a heavy Facebook question.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if we could answer perfectly, we'd have a big check. But I think that's where the design space exists for that kind of cool, exclusive thing, in my opinion, is within Messenger. And you look at there's a genre that's become pretty popular on mobile over the past 12 to 18 of these text-based choose-your-own-adventure type things, or interactive text-based adventures. And there's something there within Messenger potentially. There is some design space that I think will appeal at some point, maybe with incentives to the kind of Zach Gages and Jason Rowers of the world, or whomever, that want to find the next frontier and are interested in taking novel ideas to a very large audience, which the platforms obviously present.
Well, so just to completely blue sky it, I mean, I don't know if a messenger where you're doing, like you said, you're doing chatting and maybe more serious, trying to coordinate with your friends, or even business chatting, is the right context for games all the time. So maybe it's a separate arcade app that's using the platform, but actually you go there with the context and the focus that I want to play a game. I don't know. Much smarter people will figure it out and are able to, but yeah, I think it doesn't quite feel right currently. Yeah.
Right.
That's tough because you look at like WeChat again, kind of the super app kind of model, and then you have kind of your sub apps within it where you're accessing different types of content, and I think that's a lot of that is training the user to come onto it expecting to have all these different types of functionalities, with Facebook messengers, and frankly, even the way I use WeChat is much more about just communication. So I don't know that I would want to have them like unleash a bunch of bots on there that were like pitching me games I've never heard of, and and so I just would be like, okay, I don't know, maybe I try one every once in a while, but it would seem that would be very aggressive and intrusive.
Right.
And it's tough because you want to use these types of technologies for what they're meant for, and yet if you go way off base and you create something totally separate, then you lose the power of what the messenger apps have, which is these massive audiences and social experiences that really are where instant games, again, that's the strength of these products. So, it's a nut I don't have to solve, thankfully.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting thing. The way that WeChat actually goes about this is that they have the mini programs, and they actually have over 1 million mini programs, and their head of product essentially says, we're not going to do recommendations. It's actually a process for you to find a game in WeChat, but through that process, if you find the game that you're looking for, you're actually going to be more incentivized to, like you've gone through the process, right? So they actually don't do recommendations, which is a kind of a different way of approaching.
Discovery is a game within itself.
Yeah. Self-fulfilling prophecy, I guess. Yeah.
It's an expedition.
There's that tough line, pushing discovery too hard, that I think Facebook's probably worried about going back to where games were at some point, where you open your notifications and 78 people want 2 gold or whatever, and you've got to mine through. And I think that's what new games is trying to get away from. So falling backwards there is pretty scary.
Yeah, that's great. It's interesting. It's that. Again, it's like the WeChat model. It's like maybe they figured out something, and that's kind of the direction. But I do, while you were talking too about on the sports side, That's usually what I'm doing. I'm saying, this team sucks.
Sure. Yeah.
And in my text.
Perfect use of Messenger.
Right. Nine
hate
times
the
out of
fucking
10,
Yankees,
that's what I'm doing. So it's kind of like, is there an opportunity? This team sucks, and it's my turn in Words with Friends. Some
kind of combination within there could work.
Right.
Maybe there is. Obviously, Facebook's proven to be pretty effective at diving deep into what people are doing and what they expect them to do. And so, maybe there's ways to finely tune the gaming accessibility to the types of usage of Messenger. It would be one. Actually, I think it would be one of those ones where that would be possibly a welcome, addition to how things are discovered. But again, it's tough to build that kind of personalization engine because sometimes I use a Messenger or a chat. Again, it's sometimes using it for work. Sometimes you're using it, because the Red Sox beat the Yankees. And it's simply to go harass somebody from New York and make them feel sad, which is, I do that a lot.
Right.
But every once in a while, it's also for, you're talking to a guy about, some business stuff or other things that are just completely unrelated. And then I don't know if I want to have, a new ping pong game pitched to me.
Exactly.
And again, just completely blue sky, and this kind of goes to your first question about the difference between hyper-casual and instant. It's possible we'll end up, and from little I know about WeChat too, that the games are even smaller, right? They're really getting smaller and smaller and smaller, as opposed to a full screen, go out of your chat experience. Maybe it's just some little embedded stupid thing, but that's a fun way to, send something to your friend and give some exclamation point to the Yankees suck. The Yankees suck, and
sure.
And here, so I'm going to throw in the baseball at you. Can you hit it? Right.
The Boston Red Sox home run game. Yeah.
Right.
Just to aggravate them even more. Yeah. That would be good.
That's a great point too, because it's always just like, hey, before we used a text emoji, then it became an emoji. And then it's just what's the next? It's kind of like
the next step of
the evolution
gifts.
of that.
Yeah. Put some interactivity there, and maybe there's something interesting.
Or whatever they are.
Right. Interesting. So I have one more question, and then we'll take some questions from the audience. What's the future? We say fast forward a year from now. Are there other platforms that have instant games? Are there? Where do you think Facebook is a year from now? I guess we could,
Well, yeah. I mean, we talked a lot about Facebook, right? And I think WeChat is still really where you want to be with. I think a lot of these games. You have Line out there. You've got other social. Snap obviously is one we talk about. But I think there's going to be other homes for games that are easily accessible and easily playable. For sure, just in and around any parts of whether it's web or, frankly, it could extend into other gaming platforms. So in that case, obviously, you're back to the fishing where the fishes are, and it's not intrusive. It's expected, and I think there's definitely merit to that. Whether even gaming consoles, so it's just a quick hitter, and Right. Whether it leads into a sale of a larger game, or that it could be ad-driven, or it could be sponsored, or I think there's a lot of different ways to monetize. But there's from a distribution standpoint, I think we're just at the beginning of what these types of games can do. And while they're minimalistic, I think they can be really effective.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see the development of Facebook and how they approach, discovery. And, they're essentially becoming an app store. They're going to have to go through the same, troubles that Apple did and Google did to kind of figure those things out. I think it'll also become more interesting as they start opening up their inventory to third-party advertisers. I think right now it's closed, but platforms like WeChat are open to third parties, so it'll make it more viable for developers to kind of publish on those platforms.
That'd be great if they added like a Mintegral or something.
Yeah, we actually do work with them. So yeah, we'll see how it goes and how they address Facebook and Snap kind of address like how to do discovery, how developers are gaming the system, how regulations are coming into place to kind of regulate those things. So.
I think, yeah, as phones keep picking up, and it depends how far we're looking out, but where you're able to play a certain type of title may not matter as much very soon, and whether that's good for the instant game space or a negative will be interesting, because you may have no desire to play casual, hyper-casual stuff if you can play games that are a level up very easily without visiting those ecosystems. At the same time, I think from a pure instant games perspective, one of those platforms, and of the three we've spoken about today, I think will have something that draws players because they can get it nowhere else, and that'll change the landscape a little, but maybe not for very long. We've all sort of forgotten about Snap, but they do have perhaps the most interesting design space, and
True.
HQ was a revolution that has now sort of been forgotten about for perhaps reasons of their own. But I think there is some audience interaction design space that could be pretty cool that might bring people over there. I don't know if it'll be enough to save Snapchat, but could drive some visitation for a little while.
Right.
Yeah. I think companies like like Arcadium in New York does a lot of kind of instant games that are driven by content that is much more editorial. It's all HTML5 stuff, and getting integration in there where people that otherwise wouldn't play games, they're reading an article about how the Green Bay Packers finished against the Bears or something, and then embedded in there as an advertisement, more or less, are games that you can mess around with for a few seconds here and there, have a bit of fun, and it pushes out a message for that sponsor. And I think I could see more migration in that direction as well.
Got it. Cool. Good stuff. Thanks, guys. Really good stuff.
Thank you.
So, can we do questions?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Do we clap before the questions?
We can do questions, but I need you.
You can clap anytime.
It's like the last session. We could do questions for hours. This is great.
No, the people need to have lunch.
Lunch.
Including
Oh, yeah.
the AP
Lunch.
guys.
Lunch. Sweet.
Do you guys have questions? We do have time.
I can yell. It's fine.
Go ahead.
Oh, no.
Okay.
I knew Facebook was going to yell at us.
To you, yelling to
I gave you
you.
those questions.
So in addition to making improvements around discovery, which we hear you loud and clear, and thank you for all of your ideas, what are other tools that you would want to see in terms of making things easier to access, different features that you'd want, analytics, things that you'd want to build? What are some tools that you'd like as a platform level to provide?
So again, I'll just completely blue sky. I don't know if feasible. It'd be awesome, and it's kind of combining a few of the answers that we gave, like to tap into video, tap into the actual chat stream itself, and actually kind of have more of a sandbox that you could put some simple mechanics around right inside of the chat. I think would be very effective, and you could come up with some creative toys. So maybe more toys than games, but nothing wrong with that.
I was going to say I wish I had my devs here because they probably have a longer answer. But at the same time, I think one thing you guys do very well is dev outreach and working with dev questions. But beyond that, I think I think that's a good. The instant game I've played most is, and probably an embarrassing amount when I think about it, is what I believe is the first game ever, the basketball emoji.
Sports.
Yeah. I'm in a 4-person group chat that fires probably several hundred times a day, and at least one of those messages every day is someone trying to hit a high score, which we've been doing for years. Tools within that sandbox is a great suggestion.
Yeah, obviously, further analytics is always welcome. More information is always welcome. From our standpoint, I guess as more of a live ops publisher, connective tissue between the instant games on Messenger and our games, more in the app stores, or wherever they end up, even if they end up all the way to DigiConsole. I think that would be great as a cross platforms here. It's not going anywhere. It's going to be here. I think we should all, as a group, figure out the best way to build out the experience across platform for gamers to have, as best a game experience as they can, and for us to make money.
Any
We
other?
have time for one more question if you guys have questions. Okay.
Is it about sports?
100% about sports. No, you guys kind of talked on the idea of kind of exclusivity and game, on platforms that kind of drive people into that platform. I'd kind of like to know, do you guys feel that exclusives are good? I've been doing this for a long time, and exclusives are kind of a four-letter word for us. But I do see your reason. There's it drives people to a platform. Do you guys think that that's a positive thing for the industry as a whole, or do you think it kind of gets weighed down by the idea of people kind of becoming an us versus them?
That's my bandwagon. So, no, it's terrible for players, and I would be hard pressed to think of a counter argument to that. I'd love to play everything I want to play on my Switch, but I think there was an era of it in the past, and I think we're about to, very unfortunately, as players, enter a new era of it. Epic obviously leading the way, but Apple Arcade, Discord, I think there's going to be Google plans for it. It's a necessity on the other side of things, because people do want to carve out their own space. I think for instant games, there's interesting exclusivity because there's unique design space as opposed to just comparing hardware capabilities. But yeah, I think dark days ahead for players.
Yeah, I also think with instant games, as far as exclusivity goes, I think the modifiability of instant games is more accessible, so that a variable product can be done that is probably acceptable for an exclusivity deal. Whereas you get into, we talk about Epic or even the Apple Arcade. They're taking in much bigger efforts, much larger, deeper content, and that's not something you're going to go and you're not going to change a game you agree to a deal on the Epic Store so you can get it, released on Steam. It's a massive undertaking. But in instant games, actually, there's flexibility there potentially. I don't think anybody really wants to see exclusivity, but like I said, I mean, anytime there's distribution expansion or any kind of competition within any distribution vein, they're always going to look for advantages to get people to come to their store, whether it's better pricing or whether it's exclusive games. If you're the only ones selling ham at Christmas, that's pretty good. So get as many people in your store as you can. And I get it. I understand why they're doing that business, but again, it's not the greatest thing for the player. The players should be able to discover and find games wherever they can.
All right, so thanks to the panel. It did a great job. And thanks to the audience as well. I mean, I think that the kind of in closing, I think going back to sort of the, instant games versus the usual casual market, I mean, I think as many things as we talked about for ideas and potential, I think it's in some ways it's a no-brainer, right? It's the audience is massive, the platform is there. Let's do it.
Yeah, I think we really covered the topic expertly.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.